Hi there, I'm Stella and welcome to 30 Books, and today I am interviewing writer Nick Gadd specifically about his latest book, Death of a Typographer. Don't forget to stick around to the end when you find out what Nick is going to get for his 10% after I bought his book. Hi Nick, and
Hi,
welcome
Stella.
to 30 Books.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks for your time today. So your book, Death of a Typographer, is actually about the death of a typographer and one person, Martin.
There's a series of murders and there's typographical clues.
Can you tell us a bit more about the book?
Sure, so Martin Kern and his co-investigator Lucy are investigating a series of murders that take place in Melbourne. And at each one there's a typographical clue. So it begins with an old printer who's found dead, his body in the shape of an X, a letter X. But tied in with that there's the story of a Dutch design genius called Peter van Vloekstraten, who disappeared in the 1970s and has been engaged in a mystical scheme to create the world's most perfect font, which he scatters in secret places around the world. And so you get the story of Vloekstraten unfolding in flashback at the same time as you get Martin and Lucy trying to solve the murders in the present day, and then and finding out if Vloekstraten is connected, and if so, how. And then at the end it all kind of comes together.
Now, there is so much to love about this book. There's the humour, but which isn't to say that, well, it's an adult humour, which I really loved. And there's the mystery element, there's the typography, but there's also the Dutch element, which I absolutely loved, and I love the names that you chose. So what made you decide on having Vloekstraten as the... Is he the central piece?
Well, because Holland, the Netherlands, has a great tradition of typography, and lots of fantastic designers from Holland, and there's a chapter in this book in Amsterdam in the 1970s, which is where Vloekstraten was based, and in the 60s and 70s Amsterdam was a really cool scene, and there was a lot of design, a lot of political radicalism, you know, a lot of really interesting art going on. And I wanted to write about that, and so when I wanted to create this figure of this elusive typographer from the past, it seemed natural to make him Dutch.
So you knew a lot about typography?
Well, I knew a bit, you know, and I did a lot of research in the course of researching the book. I mean, I'm not an expert on typography, but I know enough about it to use it imaginatively, and over the last few years I've become interested in type and fonts. And the more you get into it, and you discover these fascinating, sometimes obsessive people, and the amazing stories behind fonts. So that's really what drew me in, the stories behind all this stuff.
Now let's talk a little bit about the characters. One of the other things I loved about your book, and I was telling you earlier, I was almost halfway through when I realised how fantastic you were writing female characters, because I didn't bristle once.
That's nice to know.
And it's a terrible thing to say, where often with male writers, they don't always get women right. So you've got Lucy Tan, who is Martin's co-investigator. She's in her 20s.
Yes.
So you wrote a great young woman, and she's a journalist. There's a wonderful woman called Debbie, who is larger than life. There was another woman who was in a conference, and I'd forgotten her name, in South America.
Catherine, yeah.
Catherine.
Yeah,
and then...
Felicity in London, yeah.
And then there's a... well, I don't want to give a plot giveaway. There's another woman later on. So how did you manage to write such great women characters?
I suppose you often start with people you know when you're writing characters, and I've always been surrounded by women, I suppose, in my life. I've worked with a lot of women. There are lots of women in my family. Lots of my writer friends are women. And you often begin with somebody that you know, and then you kind of push it a little bit further.
But it must be more than that, because so many men, have women in their lives, but they get it wrong.
When I was writing this book, I was workshopping sections of it, you know, and so my female friends who are writers gave me a lot of feedback, and when I was getting it wrong, then they let me know about it.
Yeah, and you took that on board. Are you proud of your female characters?
I'm proud of all of them,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm really happy with the book.
Now, I don't want to give away too many plot spoilers, but there's deaths in it.
Yes.
What was it like killing off characters? What's it like as a writer to do that?
Look, I must be a pretty cold-hearted bastard. I think I did that without any compunction at all.
Oh, right.
But I mean, it's also it's quite a parts of it are a comic novel,
Yeah.
and parts of it are a little bit cartoony. I think
That's the word.
a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, not the whole thing. I mean, I do want you to empathise with the characters and take them seriously, but some of the deaths are sadder than others. Let's say. I mean, I think there are some characters in the book where I was sad that character had to go.
Oh, you make it sound like it was out of your control.
It was out of my control. It's just the plot required it. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you wrestle with that, or were you like, no, that's what the book needs?
Yeah, no, I had to have what Graham Greene calls, the cold chip of ice in the heart,
Wow.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about some Australian books do you have a recent Australian read?
I've got a couple. So,
Yeah.
well, these are a series of novellas by Nick Earls.
Do you want to show them to the...
Yeah, so, all right. So they're actually there are 5 in the series. I've got 3 of them here. And the first one, for example, is called Gotham, and they're 5 interrelated novellas set in different parts of the world. This one's set in New York, and it's about a rapper called Nasty Boy, and an Australian music journalist who's interviewing him and what happens. And it's funny, and it's sad, and it's a lovely bit of writing, and they're beautifully designed as well. These books. Yeah. So there were 5 in the series.
They slip nicely into a bag. Good commuting read.
Yeah. You could read them on a flight.
Oh yeah.
2 hours.
And the Venice and the NoHo ones are so all books are interconnected.
They have interconnections. They all stand alone, but they're also interconnected. So they're 5. You can perfectly well read them separately.
Yeah.
But they've got great characters. The writing is beautiful, and
Recent Australian read.
this is a book by Vanessa Berry, and it's called Mirror Sydney. And this is...
I've not heard of this one.
Well, this could be your under the radar one.
Yeah.
So this is kind of partly memoir, partly psychogeography, which is another interest of mine.
Psychogeography.
Yeah.
What's psychogeography?
It's about kind of an understanding the relationships between places and personal stories and psychology and emotional life and secret, lost, hidden things.
Yeah.
Vanessa's she's got a blog called Mirror Sydney where she walks around, she's been doing it for years, finding secret, lost places. And this is the book. And it's also got her maps in it and her own illustrations.
That is just charming. Look at that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book. And she's a lovely writer. 10 Views from the Monorail, you see.
And who's this out by?
This was Giramondo, yeah.
Publishing.
Came out a couple of years ago, I think, this one.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Oh, it's signed as well.
It's signed, yeah.
Oh, nice. Yes. Now, you've got another one there. You've got a font book.
Yeah, so this is Characters by Stephen Banham. And Stephen's a friend of mine. Stephen's actually the designer of Death of a Typographer, but also we've been friends for years, and he was really the person who got me into type and fonts in the first place. And this is called...
so he designed the cover of your book.
He designed the cover, yeah, and he also designed the internal pages. So this is a book called Characters, Cultural Stories Revealed Through Typography, and it's about the type in Melbourne. So here, for example, is the famous Slade knitwear sign. And also in here there's a section about like the Skipping Girl neon sign. See if I can find that. In Death of a Typographer, you'll have noticed there's a neon sign. There's a neon signage plays quite a part in the book.
And that really, with the neon sign, my feeling was it was the Skipping Girl.
It was, related.
Yeah,
it was,
related.
Anybody from Melbourne would have got that connection. Yeah.
So when you were doing this research, have you fallen in love with signs just a little bit more?
Oh, look, I've been interested in...
Dingbats? Are they called dingbats? Is that what...
Dingbats is a type of printer's mark, yeah. I have become really interested in fonts and type, and I've done a lot of reading about it, but I'm certainly not an expert on it.
Yeah.
You know, what I love is the stories behind it,
Yeah.
and all the language of it, like glyphs and swashes and ligatures
Ah,
and font
right.
names, Aldous and Zapf, and the fact that there are these people who are seriously very fascinated by the exact shape of the dot over an I, you know,
Yes.
which is called a tittle, by the way.
Oh, right.
Yes, that's another example of the kind of lingo that you get in the world of fonts.
And two more things. So a lot of the names, like there's Martin Kern. So that is a kern is a type of
Kerning is a thing is to do with the spacing of the letters.
yeah.
It's the way that designers, typographers will arrange letters so that they fit together nicely. The spacing between them. If you see something that's badly kerned, then a designer will go, "Oh no, that looks awful. You know, the
Right.
spaces are in the wrong place." You know?
Where the rest of us probably won't even notice.
No, but so it goes back to the old days of printing, where where they used to have metal type, and if you think of like having like a letter Y, a lowercase letter Y, which has a tail on it, you think, well, how do you make sure that that tail fits under the letter next to it? You know, when you've got actual blocks of type. So it was a very sort of technical thing. That was kerning.
Now, the other thing is that this is very much a city book. And when we think of Australian literature, often lots of books are set in rural areas.
Yeah.
Do you love the city?
I do. I'm pretty much an urban guy.
Yeah.
I've got a blog called Melbourne Circle, which is about walking in the city. And my next book, hopefully, is a non-fiction book about Melbourne.
Wow.
But yes, I'm a pretty urban guy, and I like writing about cities. And so, yeah, a lot of the chapters in this book, the ones that are not set in Melbourne, are in cities like Amsterdam and
Yeah.
London
There's
and Naples.
two, there are other, but it's not the Australian bush.
It's not the Australian bush.
There's no cows in here or sheep.
No, there's no
No
sheep
cows.
at all.
No.
No.
Now, your first book was Ghost Lines,
Yes.
and that was out by Scribe. This one is out by...
Australian Scholarly Publishing.
I can highly recommend this book. Now, Nick, I bought my book from Hill of Content,
Excellent.
beautiful bookstore. It cost
Good.
me $29.95. So you get what, $3 for that as a writer? We'll
Yeah,
talk about
nearly $3,
percentages.
yes.
So what can you buy for $3? I hear you asking. Well, at the moment, avocados are
Fantastic.
$3. So there you go.
Thank you so much, Stella.
Have
That's
that
one-
on toast with
I will. I'll
with an
enjoy
egg.
this.
Yeah.
If I sell another book, I'll be able to afford the toast.
So don't forget to like and subscribe. Have you read Death of a Typographer? Love to hear your comments. I'm sure they'll all be very positive. Thanks for your
Hope so.
time, Nick.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Stella.
And I'll see you next time.